to the book of Genesis. Tonight, we're looking here at the Noahic Covenant, or God's covenant with Noah. All right? Because it's harder to say Noahic, we'll just say God's covenant with Noah. How about that? Genesis chapter 9 in your Bible. Actually, I probably spelled it wrong. I think it's like Noahic or something. I don't know. Noahic, yeah, I left the A out. Chapter 9, yes. We're kind of skipping the flood. Although we did talk about the flood a little bit. We kind of like built up, and then, hey, there was a flood, by the way. And now we're getting off the boat. What? 9. Chapter 9. So, last week we were in chapter 6. I'm going to turn this down a little bit more. Last week we were in chapter 6, and we looked at verses 9, or no, not verses 9. We looked at verses 14 through 16, and we discussed the boat itself to a certain degree. We talked about what took place there as far as the building. We talked about the building of the boat and the likening of the boat to salvation, to the cross. You guys are going to need to settle down, or we're going to have a problem. All right? Not looking for excuses of other people. I want you to do your thing, and I'll deal with the others. Okay? All right. We're good. All right, yeah. You don't want the laser eyes. You want to make sure that you're out of the way, because it might hurt you. All right, so in verse number 22, we basically summed up, Noah did what God said. Thus did Noah, according to all that God commanded him, so did he. And so chapter 7, we have, he gets on the boat, he shuts him in, right? In verse number 16, right? Shut him in. And the flood waters come. And how much was covered? It says in verse number 18, and the waters prevailed and were increased greatly upon the earth. And the ark went upon the face of the waters, and the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. So all the high hills that were under the whole heaven, right, were covered. And then it says 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. Everything was covered on the whole planet. Okay? And then as he says, all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both fowl and cattle, and of beast, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, and every man in whose nostrils was the breath of life. Of all that was in the dry land died. As every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle, and the creeping things and the fowl of the heaven, and they were destroyed from the earth. Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. Of course, we know it rained, 40 days, 40 nights. The waters prevailed 150 days. Then we find verse number 14 of chapter 8, right? The second month of the 7th and 20th day of the month was the earth dried. This is actually in verse number 13. It says, it came to pass in the 601st year, in the first month, the first day of the month, the waters were dried up from the earth. And then we have the second month. Okay, that was the first month. Now the second month. Now the earth was dried. So we have the waters begin to dry off, and Noah can take the cover off, and he's touching the dry ground. He can see the dry ground, but couldn't really get out and go anywhere yet. So they stayed there for another month and some odd days. And so he was in the ark based on what I can see here, a little over a year. Okay, so a lot of time to be in the ark. He gets out. Verse number 18, Noah went forth, and his sons, and his wife, and his sons' wives with him, every beast, every creeping thing, every fowl, whatsoever creepeth upon the earth, and after their kinds, went forth out of the ark. Noah built an altar, so he sacrifices to the Lord. Then the Lord says to him, as a response, so Noah built an altar unto the Lord, and took of every clean beast and of every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. Now you have to think about that. There are only 7 of every clean animal. Okay, there's 7, and they went in 2 and 2. So some interpret that as 14, some interpret it as 7, and they just went in 2 at a time. So it says in chapter 7, I believe it is, verse number 7 says, Noah went in, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him into the ark, because of the waters of the flood, of the clean beasts, and of the beasts that are not clean, and of the fowls, and of everything that creepeth upon the earth. There went in 2 and 2 unto the ark, or unto Noah into the ark, male and female, as God had commanded Noah. Came fast after 7 days. Okay, I skipped the part there at the beginning of chapter 7. It says, verse number 2, of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by 7s. I would say 2 and 2, right? It says 7s, the male and his female. That would be 14 of the clean beasts. 7 male, 7 female. And of the beasts that are not clean by 2, the male and his female. So, something you may not have known before, that the clean, there were 14, 7 male, 7 female. And so when he did this offering, he didn't just execute the last clean animals on the planet. Right. So he had he went ahead and took care of the offering, and then we have this done. So now he gives the offering, and it says in verse number 21 of chapter 8, the Lord smelled a sweet savor, and the Lord said in his heart, this is just his own thoughts, right? He says in his heart, I will not again curse the ground anymore for man's sake, for the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite any more every living thing, as I have done while the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall cease. So he says, as long as there's these things, as long as the earth is there, as long as there's seed time and harvest, as long as there's cold and heat, as long as there's winter and summer, as long as there's day and night, until that ceases, I won't destroy the earth in a flood again. But he goes on for the covenant here. Chapter 9, verse number 1. God blessed Noah and his sons, and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. In other words, he says, look, not very many of you. Time to get busy and refill the earth. Get the people out there. So it says, be fruitful and multiply. As a matter of fact, he commands this twice in this passage here. He says it there in verse 1, and then he says it again in verse 7. Be fruitful and multiply. Bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply therein. But he goes on, he says, and the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every fowl of the air, and upon all that moveth upon the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea. Into your hand are they delivered. Into your hand are they delivered. What? Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. In other words, he says, hey, they're all going to be afraid now because you can eat them. That's why we have to hunt, right? Because they run, they hide. Isn't it crazy how, like, just before hunting season, the deer are everywhere? I mean, they're everywhere. I mean, you hit them in the middle of the road, they're all over the place. Then when it's hunting time, you can't find a deer. I mean, they're in the road still, right? I went down. I haven't tried going out hunting for a little while, probably about 3 years, 4 years almost. And the last time I went way down to the Indiana forest or whatever, the state forest, whatever down there, and Hoosier National Forest, I think it is. Anyways, went way down there. We almost hit one on our way in. All right, my wife dropped me off, and I was meeting with Brother Kaiser, Pastor Kaiser, from McGregor Road, and so she drops me off, and I'm down there. I'm out there freezing, and I was dressed warm too, pretty warm, anyways. And I'm out there freezing. And I'm just kind of like, hey, what's what? And nothing. I didn't see, hear, smell, nothing at all. And I even looked around. It had snowed, and so I was looking around for some tracks, maybe. So night falls, done. All right, get in his truck. We go, and we have to go down and turn around somewhere. And so we go down to turn around. We almost hit two at the same time. I was like, said, "Did you see anything out there?" He said, "No, nothing." Like, man, that's crazy. Not that always happens. Of course, people do. You know, they go hunting and they get deer. So sometimes you got to sit out there for a while. And a lot of times people go out there, before the sun comes up, they'll get out there and they'll be sitting there. And then when the sun comes up, then you watch, and then you do. And some people, they'll hunt till they get one, but they'll spend many days sometimes waiting and waiting and waiting. And I just don't have time for that. Fortunately, maybe someday I will. What's that? Yeah, somebody told them, right? Yeah. It's interesting, right? That God said, yeah. It's great, or it's interesting that God said that the animals were going to fear man because of that. By the way, when animals attack man, it's because they're scared. In some cases, it's because they've been trained in that way. So like bears, down in down south a little bit, a lot of times, I mean, they'll run from you or whatever. But if you have food, they come after you because you've got food, right? If they get used to people having food, then they don't have any issue, and they're not afraid of you like they should be. Otherwise, they see a car and they run. But if they're used to people feeding them, they see a car and they come to it. They're not coming to hurt you necessarily. Well, some of them are, but they're coming to eat. If you don't have food, well, maybe they'll eat you. Exactly, because what happens is, like we were down in Gatlinburg, and they say, if you feed the bears, then basically there was like a sign that said, "Would you kill me?" There's a picture of a bear, it was like a cute picture of a bear. "Would you kill me?" And it's like, if you feed me, that's what you're doing. Like, what? How? And then they explain feeding the bear makes them come around too much. And then when they come around too much, sometimes they can get into trouble and they can hurt people or things. And because of that, when they come around, what happens? Somebody puts them down. And so feeding them ends up being that. So anyways, that's not the message tonight. Not the message tonight. So don't feed the bears. Eat the bears, no. But based on this, right, we were given the okay. We could eat bear, we could eat squirrel, rabbit, turtle, deer, cat, dog, horse, whatever. Chicken, pet chickens, right? It says, what does it say here? It says, every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. Even as the green earth have I given you all things. Now, of course, over time, and I do believe in microevolution. The Bible does teach that. Microevolution, not macroevolution. Macroevolution is when you get, you have a monkey that becomes human, or you have a fish that becomes a monkey, or becomes something else. Right, but there's all these little things in between that they don't have anywhere, can't find anywhere. Anyways, but microevolution, of course, God created his creation with the ability to adapt to its environment. Why man has adapted to his environment. Some of it is through breeding, genetics, and some of it is through Like dogs, you have lots of varieties, right? And it's all through losing information by genetics, and then some of it is from these adaptations that God put in the creature itself to be able to adapt to certain things. Generally speaking, though, evolution doesn't take place, quote unquote evolution or microevolution doesn't take place by adding information to the creature, but rather losing information. And so that can explain some of the things that our bodies can't handle, like poisonous fish and so on and so forth. So, or poisonous whatever, and then of course there's cultural things that we've eventually decided. We like dogs, we don't want to eat them, or we like, some of them, we don't anyways. But some places in the world they like dogs, and some places in the world they like to eat horse. Some places in the world they'll eat cats, and here in America we eat pigs. And some places in the world that's like, whoa, you eat pig? No way. And some places in the world they say, you eat cow? How could you? Right? So he gives us this. So the covenant has multiple things. Okay, he lets us know, hey, now you can eat meat. He says, even as the green herb have I given you all things. So before the flood, from what I can understand, everything, man specifically, ate vegetables, the green herb, the fruit of the tree, the vegetables and so forth. Well, that's vegetable, that's grain. Ate of the plants. We ate of the plants, yes, sir. They live long too. Introduce, yeah. The only thing that we have about what we eat in heaven is the tree of life, and it bears its fruit in its season. Marriage supper of the Lamb. Now, the marriage supper of the Lamb, I don't know what we eat, but we know what the birds eat. Because the very next thing we see is Jesus coming back after the marriage supper, and he says, hey, we're having a celebration. Birds, it's time for you to feast too. You're going to feast on the flesh of kings and princes and rich men and poor men. And so, not us, the birds of the field, birds of the air. I mean, yes, yeah, the fruit in its season from the. Now, by the way, in the Bible, the word meat doesn't always mean flesh. In fact, a lot of times the word meat in the Bible is talking about like bread, just something you eat. It's meat for you. So just like he says here, he says that it shall be meat for you. Before that, those animals weren't meat for us. They were animals. Well, we were to have dominion over them. He gave us that command to have dominion over them and to rule over them and to care for the world. But at some point, they were going to become food. And it was at this point, after the flood, they become food. But it wasn't before. Before that, we had the green herb. And he doesn't say here, but in the other, as we talk about when he made the vegetation, he spoke of for food, right? And even in he doesn't mention what food, but he says in verse number 21 of chapter 6, he says, take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be for food for thee and for them. And so we assume that he's not out hunting to get the food, right, based on this passage. So he's just bringing the food, the plant life, the grain, all that they need to feed for that. So the one thing about the Noah or Noahic Covenant is that, well, first of all, What were we commanded to do? Multiply. Multiply. Fill up the earth. Not just one place, which we'll get to later. But fill up the earth. Spread out. Subdue it. Yes, migrate. He says, but, he says, look, you can, now, so fill the earth, all right? And then eat animals. Praise the Lord. But the blood. Let me tell you something about the blood, he says. He says, but the flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall you not eat. And surely your blood of your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require it. And at the hand of man, at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. He says you can eat flesh. You can eat the meat, but you cannot eat blood. And you also can't eat each other either. You cannot eat the flesh with the blood in it. In other words, they had to cook it. So, not supposed to eat blood. No. The life is in the blood. What? That's disgusting. I'd just say stay away from it, man. Stay away from it. Yeah. Well, okay. How you eat your steak isn't necessarily what he's talking about here. Now, at the same time, raw is an issue when it comes to this. Okay. Now there are some things you can do. Yeah, we're talking about actually consuming the blood. Now, if there's a little bit of blood in something that you're eating, that's a different thing. You're not purposing to consume the blood there. But I would say, rare. I don't know. I don't like my cows mooing when I'm cutting into them. I don't eat it well done. I usually do medium, so somewhere in between. I just tell them, look, I don't want to see blood in my food. And as long as that's the case, I'm fine with it, So medium usually does that pink in the middle. And so, anyways, not to say that, listen, Pastor says you all have to eat, have your steak cooked this way. No. We're just, don't eat the blood. All right. So we have fruitful and multiply. We got to move along here. We're running out of time. And if I stay up here too long, I'm going to have to go home and change. All right. Don't eat the blood. Be fruitful, multiply. Eat flesh. Don't eat the blood. Don't kill each other. And if somebody kills somebody, death penalty. Now, at this covenant, we believe that based upon this concept of capital punishment that we have here, he gives us the underlying guidelines for capital punishment. Simply, anyways, it's basically, doesn't go into all the detail of who and how and when and why and all that. But he says if a man's life is taken, then his life shall be taken at the hand of his brother, basically. So it says, in verse number 6, whoso sheddeth man's blood, by him shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man. He says, if someone kills, murders, then death penalty. And that death penalty, I believe, based on that, and many teach this way, God allowed for human government to be set up, and for man to he's not feeling well. Okay. All right. Well, we'll be praying that he gets better. All right. I'm gonna be pray for little Ezra. Yeah, he didn't sound like he was doing too good. All right. Right. He'll be all right, I think. In prayer for him. So talk about that after. All right. So he sets up capital punishment, and I believe based on many things that we see after this, God then allows for human government. This is the period of time. So as far as dispensations, and we talk about that, and I won't get too deep into that, but we talk about dispensations, and this is the time that we switch. Okay, we went from innocence in the garden, right, to conscience when man received the knowledge of good and evil, right, conscience. And then man lived by his conscience up until the flood, and obviously didn't work out too well, right, because what was in their mind? Continually evil, only evil, right? So they now have the knowledge of good and evil, and their thoughts are only evil continually. But that's the fun part, at least to the flesh, right? So he sets up and allows now human government. He says, okay, look, now you're going to have to restrict one another so that you don't kill each other. So you've got to watch him, and if he kills him, then you've got to make sure that collectively you all have to make sure that he pays the price. And so, in other words, man has to govern himself, at least to a certain degree. And so he sets up human government. And then we have the next thing he says again, be fruitful and multiply and bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply therein. Then he goes on, he says, I will establish my, he says, behold, I establish my covenant. This is the Lord speaking to Noah. With you and with your seed after you, with every living creature that is with you, of the fowl, of the cattle, of every beast of the earth, with you from all that go out of the ark to every beast of the earth. And I will establish my covenant with you. Neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood. Now, of course, we know that he's going to cut off all flesh at some point again. He's going to destroy the heavens and the earth. He's going to destroy everything in fire, but not by the waters of a flood again. It says, neither shall there be any more a flood to destroy the earth. Now, does that mean that there will never be any types of flood? No. There will still be floods, right? We still have that all the time. But not one like this that covers the whole earth to destroy the earth. In other words, if the ice caps melt, we're okay as far as the flood thing goes, unless you live in Miami. You got to move inland. Actually, probably all of Florida would be gone. Well, sorry. Got to say goodbye. God said, this is the token of the covenant which I make between you and every creature that is with you for perpetual generation. As I do set my bow in the clouds. I just want to just real quick talk about this, the rainbow. It's not there for everybody to say, well, God's not going to judge us anymore. That's not the case. He does. He judges us all the time, every day. Turn around, sit down, girl. Judging you. You're going to be found guilty. God judges us all the time, and we fail greatly, and he condemns us for it. The rainbow's not there to represent sodomy, not what it's for. God put his bow in the cloud to remind him of this covenant, that he's not going to destroy man with the waters of the flood. It's to remind him of Noah and that time on the ark. Remind him of this time here. Now, there's something significant about the bow. The bow is an instrument of war. Right? Everybody know what a bow is? Anybody ever think of the rainbow in this way? No. That's what it is. It's an instrument of war. And when God puts his bow in the cloud, which direction is it facing? Up, right? If the earth were the string and there was an arrow in that bow, who would it be shooting? It'd be shooting God. He'd be shooting the heavens, right? It would be firing into the heavens. And so he sets his bow in the cloud. Sets his bow for us to see and for him to see in that same direction, facing up. There's no arrow, though. There's a couple of things here to deal with, and this is really where the crux of the message is with the bow. Right? We're teaching archery at the kids' school, and teaching it's pretty cool. We got like 10 compound bows, and on the targets, and the whole setup, and good fun time. We do archery and teach them that. And I asked the kids first day, I said, can you guys tell me the first time that we have a mention of archery? Like, ever. When did archery start? And I brought up this, the bow. Right? The bow in the clouds. This is when God makes a big deal about archery, at least to a certain degree. He puts his bow in the clouds. Remember, in Revelation, the Bible says that there's one that goes forth conquering and to conquer. What does he have? A bow. Doesn't have arrows. Why? Conquering with peace. You see, the rainbow is an instrument of peace. It's a reminder of peace. And God is saying, look, there was a time of war when man warred against God. Right? At the beginning of chapter 6, what did he say? He said, my spirit shall not always strive with man. Right? God and man were at strife one with another. And he says, listen, I'm not going to keep doing this. You got 120 years. It's done. We're done. So he says, he's going to give the death blow to mankind. Save him in Noah. And he says to Noah, look, the fight's over. Battle's over. I won. All flesh is dead. Starting over, and here's our peace compact. Put my bow in the clouds. When it rains, I'll see it, you'll see it, and we'll know. We'll remember this day that man can't just strive with God and get away with it. But I'm not going to destroy you like that again. In fact, he's not going to destroy again until the end. When it's finally done. And it'll be destroyed without remedy. Destroyed without remedy. Won't be any fixing it then. It'll be gone. In fact, he says the old heavens and the old earth have passed away. There's a new heaven and a new earth coming. He destroys all of that. And as our series is the gospel in Genesis, of course, we have to consider what in the world does this have to do with the gospel? Well, think about it for just a moment. This token that God put, the bow in the cloud, represents man's strife with God and then God fixing it. Also represents, remember the direction the bow is facing. Who takes the arrow? God does. Who took the piercings on the cross? Jesus did. Right? Pierced his side. Pierced his hands and his feet. And he says later, earlier than the New Testament, later than this, they shall look upon me whom they have pierced. Why? Because now they pierce him with a spear and with nails. But you get the point, right? That he was wounded for our transgressions. See, his spirit shall not always strive with man. And when the fullness of time was come, God sent forth his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh. He came and bore sin, condemned sin in the flesh. Right? He came and took our place. Where we should have been wiped out all over again. Everything's wicked all over again, and it hasn't changed. The world's still wicked. He sent his Son And so instead of turning the bow around and firing the arrows at us and destroying all flesh again, He sent His Son to take the death wound to the head. I'm sorry, not to the head, to the heel, rather. Take the death wound from the enemy, to die in our place, satisfy God, satisfy God's judgment, God's wrath. And just as the serpent was lifted up in the wilderness, even so, the Bible says, must the Son of Man be lifted up. Why? That we might look and live. And when we look outside after it's rained and we see the rainbow, let us be reminded that we can look to the one who took the piercing, to the one who put the bow in the sky to remind us that He's not going to destroy everything, but instead He sent His Son to be destroyed in the flesh for our sins. I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow shall be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you, every living creature of all flesh. And the water shall no more become a flood that destroyed all flesh. And the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, that I may remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is upon the earth. God said unto Noah, this is the token of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is upon the earth. Let's pray.